Hello everyone, this is Sarah from Crafting and Relaxing, and today I wanted to show you some techniques where I've cut out sentiments with the cameo silhouette, actually the silhouette cameo, and I'm going to be triple embossing them. In this instance, I have some purple cardstock that I've cut out in advance, and I'm putting some purple pigment ink over it, and then I'll put clear embossing powder and hit it with the heat gun. So right here you can see that I'm heating it up. Once it changes to bright and shiny, that's how you know when you're done with heat embossing. It doesn't get better the more heat you put on it, it will just burn. So once you see that it changes from being dingy and sandy looking to shiny, then you're done. That's the first layer. What I found with this pigment ink was that it was a little more pink than I wanted. So I have a sticker set that I'm trying to match, and that pigment ink was a little too bright. Now I'm going to use the Versamark clear ink pad on it. The Versamark is typically my favorite for any kind of heat embossing that I'm doing. And you'll see that I have a piece of paper that says ink on it. So that's the one that I'm going to get all sticky and inky. And then I'll switch over to a piece of paper for the clear embossing powder so that I don't have ink sticking in my powder. And as I'm repeating this process multiple times, I have dedicated paper to work with. I'm just putting the powder back on, and then you'll notice that when I pick it up with the tweezers, I do tap off just once. I'm not trying to get rid of a whole bunch of it, not like if you were using glitter and you were tapping off all the excess, just enough so that as I move it around, it's not dropping the powder everywhere. And you can see that I'm just coating it as much as I can. Then I pick it up and I just tap it once and set it off to the side. And be sure that when you're doing this, you're always putting your paper away before your powder away before you hit it with that heat gun, because it will blow. These are the embossing guns, blow pretty strongly, and you don't want that powder going all over. So you'll notice I'm embossing right on my Tim Holtz Tonic glass media mat. Be sure that you don't do this on your table. Most tables that we craft on can't handle this heat, but this is tempered glass. This would damage your dining room table or just about any finish on any craft table you might have. If you don't have a mat like this, be sure you hold it up or off to the side when you're doing it, which with thin words like this would be a little trickier. So again, I'm just repeating the process so that it gets very, very thick and shiny. It almost looks like I've applied a liquid to it when it's done, some sort of shine. There's so many of those products that you can purchase now, but it's just embossing powder. I'm going to cover it up again, and you'll see in the upper left-hand corner there's a silver one, and it's mounted on black, and I did the same thing to that one with silver embossing powder. And I was just experimenting with the different powders and how they turned out, and whether I thought this was a great technique and something that I would like to do again. If you aren't, which most of us aren't graphic designers, there are many, many free images, files that you can load into your Silhouette software. You can find them on Pinterest. You can just search, do a Google search. You can look on my Pinterest. There's all sorts of files, and you'll see that in my Pinterest, I've saved one that had this word in it. It had dream and hope and something else, and it had some images on it too. I just took the images off. In fact, I was so lazy that I let it cut out the image and then I just snipped it off with scissors, but you could certainly edit it in the software too. So I'm just heating it up again, and at this point, it's heavy and very thick and shiny. By triple embossing, it gives gives you some different options for how you mount it too. It doesn't have to be glued down flat. It could add more texture to the page because it's so stiff and large at this point. And you'll see this is a funny trick of triple embossing. I dented it when I touched it with the tweezers because all those layers underneath it are so hot. So I touched it up without adding any ink at all, which is pretty unusual in embossing, but it's because all those layers were sticky. And then I'm just hitting it with the gun again and remelting it. So it just smoothed it right out and I don't have to worry about anything. And you'll notice I put that embossing powder right on the mat, not on the paper because I was in a hurry and I was trying to get that patched. And because it's glass and it's so smooth, I can just wipe it right back into my jar. I still wouldn't advise dumping piles and piles and cleaning it up that way, but that was really handy. So I'm setting that one aside just to cool and get sturdy. And I have another piece of the same exact cardstock. And this time I'm going to do all 3 layers in the clear Versamark because I don't want it to be so pink and I want to see how it turns out this way. So I'm just inking it up again, still using the same pieces of paper. Then I'll go ahead and I'll put the clear powder on it. And I do have other powder too, but in this instance, because I'm working with some product that has a lot of purple, I wanted purple text. Emboss it and then repeat the process. And the thing that's nice about triple embossing is if it doesn't turn out the first time, it automatically repairs itself on the next layers. So that's very nice. It's not like when you do single embossing and sometimes you're unhappy with the result or there's variety. I found that in triple embossing, all of them turned out beautiful and I was excited to use them in projects going forward. So you can see how well the powder shows up, the white powder on the dark cardstock. And if you're learning to emboss, a clear powder on a dark paper would be a really good way to practice because it's so easy to see. And you can see how fast it changes color there. And at this point, the gun is warmed up, so that's very nice. It's hot on my fingers, but it doesn't take long to melt the powder at all. The interesting thing to note here is how dark that paper looks. It's a plum colored paper, but it looks nearly black. And I'll show you the original colors of the paper so you can see what that looks like and the variation. And that's just one thing, as a crafter you're used to. You thought it would be more purple, but it turns out it's a little darker, and that's okay. I still like it and I'll use it. And I'm going to repeat the process and get it nice and thick and shiny. And then with the silhouette, after you do your triple embossing, it's easy to just push cut again and mount these on white paper or silver paper or some light pastel paper that gives you some contrast. Just like this silver hope that's on black, I can put these purple ones on white or something that helps them pop a little bit. Just remember, if you're triple embossing, you just cut the one, but you could cut 2 at the same time. You could cut the one that you're going to do the embossing on and then place another color of paper somewhere on your cutting mat and cut the other one at the same time. I didn't think of that, but that's okay. I didn't have a plan. So you can see what the original paper looked like. So the first ink made it more pink, and then the second one, where I only used clear Versamark and clear powder, just made it so dark and shiny that it's very, very dark. Even in person, it's not just how it looks on the video. Even in person, it's nearly black looking. And you can see I've set the ink out for you. So I used a Papercraft pigment ink. That ink is very old, so I'm not sure that it still exists. And that pigment ink gave me an interesting option, an interesting feature on embossing with it because I didn't get full coverage the first time. So the bright purpley pink ink didn't cover all of the dark paper. So it looks a little more marbled than typical embossing. Like the Hope, for instance, with the silver gave complete coverage the first time, but the pinky purple didn't cover all the way. So that's kind of an interesting feature in it. I didn't look at it as a downfall. I kind of liked it, and that was one of the reasons I stopped using the purple ink. And maybe on like the stem of the P or a couple of the corners, you could see that. So thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe.